the committee's priorities have been elsewhere under the current majority. So I hope we can fix that this Congress. But we can't just sit here today and pretend like everything is normal and that this is just another hearing on government efficiency. I mean, all you have to do is look across this room and see that it is not a normal hearing. Because while we're sitting here, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are recklessly and illegally dismantling the federal government, shuttering federal agencies, firing federal workers, withholding funds vital to the safety and well-being of our communities, and hacking our sensitive data systems. In fact, while we were here discussing government waste on the House floor yesterday, Elon Musk was standing behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office with the president, and the administration was making emergency court appeals to try to unlock his team's access to the Treasury payment system, which they claim they are using to study improper payments, which is the topic of this hearing. But here's the thing. The Treasury payment system, which includes Social Security information and bank accounts for millions of Americans and data that's critical to national security and the operation of the U.S. government, and payments that go out the door annually equal to almost a fifth of the U.S. economy, is not where the payment decisions are made, because that happens inside the agencies that are currently being dismantled. And the people who actually investigate waste, fraud, and abuse at these agencies are the inspector generals, who Donald Trump fired his first week in office in a midnight massacre. So we have to ask ourselves, what is really going on here? Why did Republicans block Elon Musk from appearing before this very committee last week? Why is the administration so eager to allow Elon Musk and his hackers to have access to proprietary and private information in the Treasury payment systems? Why are our colleagues across the aisle shielding them as they are clearly breaking the law? And why is the vice president trying to rewrite the U.S. Constitution by tweet and undermine the judiciary? So obviously we're in the Oversight Committee and we have a lot of questions, and so do the American people, especially while our colleagues across the aisle are trying to scoop up the savings from the dismantling of these agencies to pay for the largest permanent tax break in American history for billionaires and the folks that they're helping on their side of the aisle. So let me close by saying this directly to Mr. Elon Musk. We are well aware that you are eager to engage with members of Congress on social media, but we're not here to play. If you have serious desire to engage in democracy and transparency, we welcome you to the Oversight Committee. Come and testify in front of the American people under oath, because we want to know what you're up to. So if you're interested in talking to us, then please join us here in the People's House in the House of Representatives. And with that, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. President Trump signed an executive order on his first day in office called Establishing and Implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency. The EO simply renamed an office in the White House that was actually established by President Obama in 2014 called the U.S. Digital Service. President Trump can have Elon Musk into his Oval Office anytime he likes. I now recognize the chairman of the Oversight Committee, Chairman James Comer.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman Green, for holding today's hearing to launch a war on waste. President Trump won an electoral landslide with a clear mandate from the American people to eliminate Washington waste and stop the theft of American tax dollars. And he is delivering on his promise. President Trump has empowered Elon Musk and DOGE to conduct a government-wide audit to identify solutions to curb waste and protect tax dollars. That's exactly what the mission of this committee is supposed to be. And I'm glad that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have found a newfound interest in waste, fraud, and abuse. With a staggering $37 trillion in national debt, we have no time to lose. A key place to start is improper payments. Since 2003, the government has lost $2.7 trillion because of improper payments. fraudsters, organized criminals, hostile foreign actors, and even government employees have siphoned money away from those who truly qualify for assistance. For years, Republicans and Democrats on the Oversight Committee have condemned this waste. But now that DOGE is taking real action, Democrats are choosing to defend the bureaucracy and status quo instead of standing up for the American people. I want to thank Chairwoman Green for holding this very important hearing, not only to expose the problems, but to find solutions. We stand with President Trump and DOGE in the fight to end waste, fraud, and abuse in Washington. With that, I yield back to Subcommittee Chairwoman Green, and congratulations again, Chairwoman, on holding this first hearing of the DOGE Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the ranking member on oversight, Mr. Connolly.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for having this first hearing on DOGE. Improper payments is not a new subject. I remember joining Steve Lynch and then Todd Platts, Republican member from Pennsylvania, in my freshman year, talking about improper payments. At that time, improper payments were in the range of $35 billion a year. They're now in the range of $280 billion a year, and times 10, we could cut almost $3 trillion from the debt if we addressed improper payments in a deliberative way, which GAO has called for in the high-risk category for years. We can also, secondly, enforce the tax code. It's estimated that at least $500 billion a year is left on the table uncollected but owed because of lack of resources in the IRS. Again, times 10 is $5 trillion over a decade. And finally, we can modernize federal IT systems, which we've championed for years on this committee. We know that legacy systems alone could save hundreds of millions of dollars a year in operating and maintenance costs. So if we want to be serious about it, let's be serious about it. But the way not to do it is to fire the people charged with the remit of waste, fraud, and abuse, namely inspectors general. President Trump has already now fired 19, including most recently the USAID Inspector General, who dared to warn that we could lose $500 million of food aid because it's in warehouses not being moved because of the funding freeze that was imposed in AID. That's a cost we need to avoid. And for doing his job, that IG was fired. If we want to be serious, we've got to have objective, neutral inspectors general who are monitoring government waste, fraud, and abuse and expenditures. And I think you would find Democrats more than willing partners in that kind of enterprise if we're going to be serious. But a wrecking crew, a wrecking crane, a wrecking ball is not going to do it, and we're not going to support that approach to waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields. The President of the United States has the prerogative to fire anyone that has overseen $36 trillion in debt, enslaving the American people, and rightfully so. I'm pleased to welcome today's expert panel of witnesses who each bring unique experience and expertise that will be valuable to today's discussion. I'd first like to welcome Mr. Haywood Talcove, the Chief Executive Officer for Government at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, Inc. His commitment to customers' needs allows LexisNexis to develop market-leading solutions that have enabled customers to stop fraud, waste, and abuse. Next, we have Mr. Stuart Whitson, the Senior Director of Federal Affairs at the Foundation of Government Accountability. Stuart was previously a special agent in the FBI, a U.S. Army veteran, and now spends his time at FGA advocating to improve welfare, the workforce, and other policy. Next, we have Ms. Dawn Royal, a certified welfare fraud investigator in the state of Wyoming and director for the United Council of Welfare Fraud. She advocates for investigating and preventing fraud of government benefits and has done so over the past 16 years. Finally, we have Mr. Dylan Hetler Gaudet, the Director of Government on Government Oversight. Dylan leads advocacy efforts and policy reforms to a wide range of good governance. I thank each of our witnesses for being here today and I look forward to your testimony. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you. You may take a seat. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statement and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statement to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it is on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we would ask that you please wrap up. I now recognize Mr. Talcove for his opening statement.
Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansberry, and distinguished members of the committee. For over a decade, a silent war has been waged against American taxpayers, not with bombs or guns, but with data and technology. Outdated government systems permit criminals to access unlimited sums of money. During the pandemic, they stole $1 trillion. 70% of those dollars went overseas. Shockingly, it's just not criminals exploiting the system. It's the flawed system itself acting as the accomplice. If left unchecked, the U.S. government will continue to lead the world in funding cyber criminals. This is a data and technology problem, and it demands a data-driven response. Criminal syndicates have turned benefit programs into their personal ATM machines, exploiting those in need who wait months for benefits that may never come. These ruthless crooks use our money to fund child trafficking, disperse drugs in our communities, and terrorism. For years, criminal networks have stolen personal information from the public and private sector. They exploit real identities to manipulate antiquated government systems, siphoning off billions in taxpayers' hard-earned money. We continue to pay benefits to deceased and incarcerated individuals, direct money to bad actors flagged on the do not pay list, and overlook duplicate Social Security numbers by not following best practices. During the pandemic, a simple cross-check of PPP loan recipients against IRS records would have exposed massive fraud and prevented payments to transnational criminals who sold their quote-unquote sauce on the dark web. To stop this, we must reclaim control of our systems, not just from the criminal syndicates, but the flawed systems enabling them. Smarter technology, data, and identity verification are not optional. They are necessities to protect taxpayers and ensure aid reaches those who truly need it. Now, the use of AI is fundamentally changing society, but in the hands of criminals, it has become a weapon. Lawbreakers are now using it to supercharge their war on taxpayers. They use AI to create fake identity documents that pass biometric verifications. Bots flood portals with thousands of fraudulent claims per second, and deep fakes that mimic real applicants bypass the outdated NIST 863 standards from 2017. Honest and deserving people seeking access to government benefits suffer through endless application forms that are nearly impossible to navigate. But criminals from Russia, China, and Romania gain access with ease. The private sector has fraud rates below 3%. Meanwhile, the public sector operates at a 20% fraud rate. The solution is clear. It's already used every day to protect consumers. You seamlessly interact with your bank through an app that verifies your identity in milliseconds. There's no excuse for the government to lag if we do the following. Number one, implement identity verification on the front end. Criminals should never receive a dime. Eliminate self-certification. No more honor system for billion-dollar programs, and continuous auditing. Keep verifying because criminals never stop adapting. Pay and chase does not work. Of the $250 billion stolen in pandemic unemployment fraud, less than $5 billion has been recovered. The idea in government that you cannot have speed and security is fiction. I urge Congress to consider making the following legislative changes. Number one, update the 1974 Privacy Act to allow for data sharing and matching. Number two, fund a budget for fraud prevention in each appropriation bill. The USDA spends 1/20th of 1% on fraud prevention. Mandate that individuals caught stealing from entitlement programs pay hefty fines and are removed from the program permanently. And finally, eliminate broad-based categorical eligibility. This committee has a choice: continue losing this war against criminal cartels and nation states, or fight back and save $1 trillion annually. Fraud prevention is not benefit prevention. It's the key to ensuring that every dollar reaches those who truly need it. Hardworking Americans rely on these programs not just to survive, but to build better lives for their families. When criminals exploit the system, they just don't steal money, they steal opportunities. Stopping fraud isn't about denying benefits, it's about protecting them. This crime has two victims. The first are the taxpayers, and the second are those seeking benefits. The fraudsters, cartels, and criminal syndicates are watching this hearing, I'm sure of it. It's time to show them that America will not fund its own destruction. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Talcove. I now recognize Ms. Royal for her opening statement.
Good morning, Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansberry, and committee members. My name is Dawn Royal. I'm a certified welfare fraud investigator, two-term past president, and a current director of the United Council on Welfare Fraud. The United Council on Welfare Fraud is a national professional organization dedicated to protecting the integrity in our nation's public assistance programs. We are the only national organization singularly focused on the detection, prevention, and prosecution of welfare fraud. For too long, agency bureaucrats have pitted citizens' access to welfare programs against the integrity of those programs. Access versus integrity should never be an either-or dichotomy. We can all agree that access to public assistance is crucial. America's citizens should not be hungry or deprived of medical care because of their inability to pay. However, making sure vulnerable citizens have access to these welfare programs should not mean that we simply turn a blind eye to integrity. We do not pursue the prevention, detection, and prosecution of if we do not pursue the prevention, detection, and prosecution of fraud, taxpayers become the victims as the welfare programs become slush funds for anyone wanting to supplement their income with SNAP benefits, absolve themselves from the financial responsibility of medical bills, and using Medicaid to further taxpayer exploitation by taking advantage of cash assistance, energy assistance, child care, and other social welfare programs. One example of a welfare fraud is a case that I investigated that was criminally prosecuted last year. The applicant mother failed to disclose her children's father as well as his employment and income on multiple applications she submitted for Medicaid, SNAP, and low-income energy assistance. The co-defendant father worked a steady job, earning a six-figure salary, and provided an enviable lifestyle for his family, including vacations, luxury vehicles, snowmobiles, motorhomes, lavish gifts, including one from the wife to the husband, which was a $1,200 bottle of bourbon. Evidence we presented at trial included a candidate registration forms filed by the defendant father when he ran for town council and later mayor of the town where he declared he lived at the same address provided by his wife on her public assistance programs. This was a case of greed, but it emphasizes how easy it was for these criminals to make false statements on applications in order to receive benefits from multiple programs that they were never eligible for. I could spend the rest of my day providing countless examples of how taxpayer-funded programs are exploited, and the message would be the same. Investigators continue to be hamstrung by antiquated regulations, conflicting directives from federal agencies, and the lack of access to technology. Sadly, investigators have also found themselves at odds with the career bureaucrats who recite watered-down facts about fraud in order to promote their political agendas. Specifically, we can look to the career bureaucrats who have historically claimed that the fraud rate in SNAP is less than 1%. The disregard for the value of integrity is evidenced by the less than 1/20th of 1% of the SNAP budget spent on the prevention, detection, and prosecution of fraud. As part of Medicaid unwinding debacle, the bureaucrats specifically directed states that they, and I quote, cannot recover or recoup the cost of services from a beneficiary, even if they have been found after an administrative hearing or criminal proceeding to have committed Medicaid beneficiary fraud or abuse, end quote. Sadly, it is already apparent that career bureaucrats are not being totally transparent as they attempt to protect spending and broken programs. We fail to understand how mitigating the rampant fraud in Medicaid, SNAP, and other welfare programs stands up or strengthens the welfare programs. Fact is, the opposite is true. Ignoring fraud and gaslighting fraud statistics erodes the very foundations of the programs that are essential to their future viability. There are things this committee can do to help the investigators fighting the war on fraud. Number one, eliminate self-attestation in the application process for all programs. Number two, funding for technology that includes identity verification tools that will help prevent fraud. The current pay and chase model is not sustainable. Number three, immediately implement the National Accuracy Clearinghouse, the NAC, that will provide data to states to prevent duplicate participation in all of the social welfare programs. And four, allocate direct funding with mandates restricting the use of the funding to the prevention, detection, and prosecution of fraud. In closing, we're at a crossroads. Those of us who have firsthand knowledge of the degree in which public welfare programs are being attacked know that reform is absolutely necessary. Reform to the recipient application process, the billing process in Medicaid, and how SNAP benefits are processed, and how providers and retailers are authorized. We thank you for the opportunity for UCOF to participate in this hearing. We feel that the investigators who are on the front lines fighting the daily battle against the war on fraud need to be at the table and participating in the development of action plans that will make a difference in protecting the programs and defending the taxpayers.
Thank you, Ms. Royal. I now recognize Mr. Whitson for his opening statement.
Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansbury, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. On the campaign trail, President Trump promised to take on the bloated bureaucracy in D.C., rebuild trust in the DOJ and the FBI, crack down on waste, fraud, and abuse, and restore common sense. And on day one, he started delivering on those promises with a wave of executive orders and the official launch of DOGE, which he, of course, tasked Elon Musk to lead. Already, DOGE efforts have brought to the public's attention countless examples of wasteful spending, including $59 million paid to luxury hotels in New York to house illegal immigrants, $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. The list goes on. But rather than applauding the work of DOGE, the left has launched a coordinated campaign to try to demonize Mr. Musk with the hope of shifting focus away from the disastrous waste, fraud, and abuse that occurred on Biden's watch. But guess what? It's not working. Because no matter what political party people hail from, the vast majority of Americans agree that $10 million worth of food funneled to Al-Qaeda was probably not the best use of taxpayer money. But there's another source, a key source of wasteful spending that DOGE and the subcommittee should set their sights on next, and that's Medicaid waste and fraud. While initially meant as a program for the truly needy, Medicaid is bloated into a massive welfare program for millions of able-bodied adults lured into the trap of government dependency. And as Medicaid has grown, so too has mismanagement. Today, more than $1 in $5 spent on Medicaid is improper. In Medicaid alone, fraud and mismanagement is on track to cost U.S. taxpayers, get this, more than $1 trillion over the next 10 years. When it comes to the problem of improper payments, the Medicaid program is the biggest culprit, encompassing nearly 1/3 of all federal improper payments. And more than 80% of Medicaid improper payments are due to one thing: eligibility errors. If Congress wants to help President Trump address wasteful spending, then targeting eligibility errors in Medicaid should be one of your top priorities. Bottom line, to address this challenge, Congress can take 3 decisive actions. So first, Congress can strengthen the Medicaid program through legislative action. That would include repealing Biden's disastrous Medicaid streamlining rule, which ties the hands of states trying to remove ineligible enrollees, You can and should do this through reconciliation, and it will produce $164 billion in savings if you do. You can also strengthen verification requirements to ensure only eligible individuals receive benefits and ensure a nationwide NAC is implemented without delay. Second thing Congress can do is help President Trump's DOGE effort by ensuring that entrenched partisan bureaucrats don't stand in the way of reform. So Musk and his DOGE team have already found hundreds of billions of dollars funneled into wasteful, fraudulent, and flat out insane projects. But they've only scratched the surface. If this much fraud has been exposed in just a few weeks, imagine what else is buried under layers of red tape and government excuses. But guess what? All of these insane projects have one thing in common. They were all approved and funded by unelected bureaucrats. And these and other entrenched bureaucrats are already pledging to fight against President Trump's efforts to improve government accountability and efficiency. Personnel is policy. And without competent staff to faithfully execute the president's agenda, the DOGE project will fail. And this is where Congress can help. Congress can support the president in carrying out his DOGE effort by making all executive branch employees at will, codifying the president's authority to fire unproductive or insubordinate agency employees as needed. At the same time, Congress can grant the president authority to permanently eliminate vacant positions and consolidate non-essential positions across agencies and departments to help promote efficiency and put the right people. The third thing, Congress can make President Trump's DOGE cost-cutting and deregulatory reforms permanent by passing the REINS Act. And so there's only one big problem with the DOGE effort. Most of its work can be undone by a future president with a stroke of a pen. To make President Trump's DOGE reforms permanent, Congress must act. And the best way to do this is to pass the REINS Act. This would return Article 1 budgetary power of the purse to Congress while promoting deregulation. It would also help lock in the DOGE reforms and cement President Trump's legacy as the most consequential deregulatory and cost-cutting president in U.S. history. The American people are watching. It's time for Congress to act. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Whitson. I now recognize Mr. Gaudet for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansberry, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Dylan Gaudet, and I am the Director of Government Affairs at the Project on Government Oversight, or POGO. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today to talk about the critical issue of bringing more accountability and transparency to federal spending, including rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. Since our founding in 1981, POGO has been focused on promoting more accountability and rooting out wasteful spending and promoting efficiency, especially at the Department of Defense. We have a long and well-established track record on these issues, and we take a back when it comes to promoting a better and more effective government, which necessarily includes a federal government that is a good and responsible steward of taxpayer dollars. Let's take a moment to pause here to talk a little bit about terms that we're going to hear a lot today and the difference between them. Waste is different from fraud. Fraud is different from abuse, and abuse is different from both. When we talk about improper payments, they are a subset of those other three categories. But that doesn't tell us the whole picture either. Sometimes improper payments are a function of bad record keeping. Sometimes they are a function of outdated information technology systems. Sometimes they come about through human error, and sometimes they come about through negligence. There are a variety of reasons why improper payments happen. It just simply is not the case that improper payments are only a function of bad people doing bad things with bad intent. That doesn't mean we shouldn't focus on trying to mitigate improper payments, and that certainly doesn't mean that the American people should not be concerned with how their tax dollars are used. The good news is that there are some time-tested solutions and tools to help mitigate these problems. For example, when we think about the independence of inspectors general, we're talking about a resource that is extraordinarily valuable to the American people. In fiscal year 2023 alone, inspectors general identified over $93 billion worth of potential savings to taxpayers. Whistleblowers are also an incredible resource to the American taxpayer. Through the IRS's whistleblower program alone, billions of dollars have been recouped from tax cheats since the inception of that program in 2007. Whistleblowers have also played an instrumental role in helping the Department of Justice pursue False Claims Act cases that have resulted in billions of dollars in reclaimed settlement costs. It seemed to me that if an administration were serious about wanting to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, they would support and resource whistleblowers and inspectors general. They would not demonize them, and they would certainly not fire them en masse in an unlawful midnight purge. There are other reforms we can think about too, reforms that are more technical, but just as important. Key statutes such as the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, the Data Act, and critical platforms like usaspending.gov were really important improvements and innovations when they came about, but they are in need of overhaul and reform. Currently, the status quo is that we have an extraordinarily hard time tracking federal dollars from end to end. This is due in large part to a broken chain of data collection, of reporting information, and the ability to monitor and track in real time what is happening with federal dollars. This informational black hole is where a lot of impropriety happens. It's where waste, fraud, and abuse live. And yes, this is where improper payments often happen. But more importantly, we also don't have a good, clear, and consistent way of understanding what is happening with tax dollars at the end point. What is the impact that we're having? What is the return on investment that we're having? We now have an annual budget of close to $7 trillion a year. We can't say with any degree of clarity and consistency what we're getting for all of that money. We have some more good news, though. There are bipartisan efforts, and there have been for years, to try and clean up this situation. We at POGO have had the privilege and pleasure of working on some of those initiatives. We were a part of the Federal Taxpayers' Right to Know Act being passed into law just a couple of years ago, which created for the very first time a program inventory of all the programs in the federal government, and that would be available to the public. We have worked with a member of this very committee, the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, to introduce a piece of legislation that would bring more transparency to federal subaward reporting. We have supported and endorsed multiple pieces of legislation that take direct aim at the improper payments issue. We also have additional ideas that don't yet have congressional champions. One proposal is to clean up and modernize and standardize the award descriptions that are available in USA Spending to make them more useful and relevant. We have another proposal to harmonize the amount of data and information we collect between contract spending and non-contract spending. We stand ready, willing, and able to work with anybody who wants to work with us on these common sense solutions. Lastly, I want to put in a quick word for Congress.
Yeah.
And specifically, I want to
The gentleman's time has expired.
Apologies.
Yes,
I can't see the flashing light.
that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Hetler. Got it. We appreciate your testimony. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. I'd like to thank our witnesses today for your testimonies and the suggestions that you have brought before this committee. I'd also like to thank Chairman Comer for this opportunity to chair the Historic Oversight Subcommittee on DOGE. Americans are shocked to learn that $2.7 trillion of their hard-earned tax dollars have been stolen or wasted in improper payments since 2003. You see, in the private sector, companies can't continue to run if they keep employees that allow waste and abuse with their resources. But that has continued for decades here in the federal government. Mr. Talcove, do private sector companies have a lower rate of improper payments than the federal government?
Yes, the fraud rate that the criminals are taking advantage of in the public sector is around 20%. In the private sector, it's around 3%. And it's really because the tools that are used in the private sector aren't used in the public sector. Front-end identity verification, self-certification, and then finally making sure that individuals are who they say they are. If we start using these tools, you will see the fraud rate go down dramatically, because for the most part, this fraud isn't taking place by real individuals. It's individuals whose identities have been stolen on the dark web. They use that information pretending to be somebody else, and because of the antiquated systems, processes, and technologies in place in government programs, they're able to steal at scale.
Right. So, Mr. Talcove, we would say that private companies that pretty much have to exist on a 20% profit rate, they are not allowed. They can't continue to be successful if they were to allow their customers' data to be stolen like that and used by criminals. However, the federal government, who can continue printing checks and continue in operation, never fixes its problems because it can't be forced to go out of business. Would you agree with that? Yes or no?
Yes. One of the things I noticed during COVID was the criminals learned that government was the mark because it never runs out of money. And they focus on it at scale, and then the likelihood of getting caught is virtually zero.
I think it's outrageous for Americans to know that their identity can be stolen and then used for child trafficking, drug trafficking, and terrorism, like you stated in your opening statement. Ms. Royal, your testimony states that many programs operate under essentially an honor system in which applicants need not verify their identity, income, residency, or other key eligibility factors. You call this a trust everyone instead of a trust by verify approach. Does this mean the federal government in some states are giving out billions of dollars to individuals without verifying who they are or whether they meet program eligibility requirements?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
That's outrageous. Do states have enough incentive to prevent fraud and to recover improper payments?
No, and in fact, states are hesitant to spend their state dollars to protect federal dollars.
Would greater investment in program integrity efforts yield a positive return for taxpayers?
Yes, it could easily be self-funding.
Amazing. Mr. Whitson, your testimony states that both the Biden and Obama administrations issued rules and guidance that made it harder for states to verify eligibility for Medicaid. You say that repealing Biden's Medicaid streamlining rule would save $164 billion over 10 years because the rule restricts eligibility verification that states can perform. Can you explain why this rule is so costly?
Yeah, so the rule does a number of things, but for instance, it prohibits states from verifying eligibility more than once a year. So for non-disabled folks to just go in and look and say, hey, are you still eligible for the program? It says you are forbidden from doing that any more often than once a year. And so obviously people's lives change, and so they may become ineligible, and so it's designed to keep them on the program. Another thing, it prohibits in-person or phone interviews to verify their identity. So people apply for it, and then the person on the other end says, well, I just want to call and make sure this is a real person, not someone in another country or whatever. The rule prohibits that. And so there's a number of other provisions. It also opens a lengthy reconsideration periods, and this is where illegal immigrants are able to obtain the benefits. And so basically it says once you get these benefits, you can't interfere with it for a 90-day period or longer. And so there's a number of horrible things. But.
So we can't verify if someone is illegal or legal receiving benefits. Just to correct that, yes or no?
You have to wait a state has to wait at least 90 days. And actually what we're seeing is it's led some states to wait as long as 13 years. And so on the problem.
Unbelievable. My time has expired. Thank you very much. I now recognize Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First of all, let me congratulate you and also Ms. Stansbury on your new positions. And I want to thank the witnesses for your testimony. We've already heard some good ideas about how to work together. And Mr. Gaudet, I for one would be most open to working with POGO and trying to work on some of the legislative ideas that you have to actually get at some of this waste, fraud, and abuse. Since this is my first opportunity to speak in this new subcommittee as the representative for the 8th Congressional District in Massachusetts, I want to first of all make clear that my primary purpose in seeking appointment to this subcommittee is for the singular and sacred purpose to defend our democracy, which I believe is under attack in this country, and to uphold my oath to support and defend the Constitution against those who might secretly or openly seek its destruction. Make no mistake, this is a moment for representative democracy. This is a test of our resolve. In the coming days and weeks, we will all get to decide whether we stand with a couple of billionaires who, despite their own financial successes, still harbor such grievances in their hearts that after all that democracy has provided to them, they remain animated by the desire to dismantle this democratic government and to punch down at some of the weakest and most vulnerable in our society. Two men who clearly understand that the easiest way to incite large numbers of people is to use social media to exploit the dynamic forces of hatred and fear. Madam Chair, if we're going after waste, fraud, and abuse, let's start with abuse. Abuse of power. As of yesterday, there were 55 lawsuits under consideration by the federal courts across our nation as a result of Elon Musk's and President Trump's unlawful acts. Many of those lawsuits have already been sustained by the federal district courts and orders have been rendered to undo those unlawful acts. But this is just the beginning, and Congress has an important role to play, and I, for one, look forward to that opportunity. This is a moment of great consequence for our country and for our democracy, and I remain grateful to the good people of the 8th Congressional District of Massachusetts who sent me here. Mr. Hetler Gaudet, again, happy to join you on some of your efforts. POGO has worked very closely with our IG community, is that right, the Inspector Generals?
Yeah, that's